Thanks, Tyler, and thank you for tuning in to the Amherst Weekly Report.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Amherst Weekly Report. I'm Jade Mosley.
And I'm Mariana Gonzalez.
On October 9th, the Citizens for Juvenile Justice Organization hosted their Know Your Rights training at the UMass Amherst campus in the new Africa House. The training was led by Community and Engagement Coordinator Jilly Santos and Executive Director Leon Smith of the Citizens for Juvenile Justice Organization. The training focused on teaching community members their rights when detained by law enforcement officers. They discussed Miranda rights, the interested adult rule, and what to do if a police officer stops an individual for questioning or if they're arrested. The Citizens for Juvenile Justice Organization, also known as CFJJ, is a Boston-based organization composed of juvenile justice professionals who oppose regressive legislation that threatens the key principles of the juvenile justice system. The organization's mission is to create a reform that gives rehabilitation to imprisoned youth rather than adult-like prison sentences. The training came to UMass after the organization was urged to, following an incident that took place last July, where a group of BIPOC students were told that they have no rights because of their age. The organization uploaded a video of the occurrence to their Facebook page, stating that it is so important to make sure that young people know their legal rights when they come into contact with the police, or any aspect of the juvenile or criminal legal system. These types of events are done by the organization in different places across the state, making them the only organization that advocates for juvenile justice at a statewide level. CFJJ does forums, conferences, and yearly celebrations in order to reach the community with their message to advocate for a juvenile justice reform. News correspondent Ariana Gonzalez was able to interview the organizers of the event, Community and Engagement Coordinator of the CFJJ organization, Jilly Santos, and the Executive Director, Leon Smith.
I was really bothered by it. It was completely inappropriate, and it's the type of behavior that's really harmful towards young people. When you consider the power dynamic that was at play, you have a police officer, someone with the level of authority, a government official with this power, effectively disempowering a group of young people. There's harm to that. And when you look at the scenario as it played out on video, not only was it him telling these young people something that was categorically false, that they had no rights. This is someone who was keeping these young kids effectively in custody, telling them they weren't free to leave for conduct that was not a crime under our general laws. In 2018, violations of local ordinances were decriminalized for juveniles, and yet these young people were still detained, told they were not free to leave. They were being questioned without an interested adult, and they were not informed of their Miranda rights in that situation. So there was a lot wrong with this situation, and we should never put our young people in the situation where they're allowed to feel disempowered, especially based upon complete misinformation from someone who's a person of authority. The future of CFJJ looks bright, in my opinion. We have the 4 pillars of our work. We have our advocacy, we have our public education, we have our research, and then we have our community engagement and our coalition building. And we're really working hard both to advance policies that will benefit and address the needs of young people, while also pushing back against regressive policies that we believe will do much more harm than good for young people. So policies like hardening schools or trying to increase pretrial detention, we will use our research and data to push against those. But we are also actively working with a coalition of partners across Massachusetts to advance reforms that will really reimagine youth justice and really focus on taking young people who are struggling and making sure they get the help that they need when and where they need it, rather than being pushed into carceral systems which only do more harm.
I hope to see a future of CFJJ in which community organizations know about us and know that we are a resource to be at their disposal and at their service, and that we're not sort of a lofty, detached, distanced, statewide nonprofit policy organization that is going to go into their communities and, extract their stories and then sort of run and go off on our own agenda. That's not what we're trying to do at all. We want to be a resource, and we want to be a source of support. And we also want to build that trust and those rapport with communities, community organizations, community leaders, where they feel that, if something goes down in their community similar to Amherst, they can reach out to us. And that is actually how it went down in this sense. And I think that if that were to happen more frequently in responses to these incidents, hopefully, there would be less incidents, right? But I think that would be a really important task for CFJJ to be able to, or a really important role for CFJJ to be able to fill.
In order to learn more about the organization, email Jilly Santos at cfjj.org for more information.
While the 5 colleges at one point universally required masks as the pandemic stretches on, the members of the consortium have begun to face this semester of COVID with a new approach. UMass removed their mask mandate for the fall semester. Smith College intended to require masks in classrooms only for the first 2 weeks, then switched to a mask optional rule. That policy was reversed, however, as the campus began reporting new cases. Hampshire College continues to require masks. Mount Holyoke had considered going mask optional in October, but the president of the college extended the mask mandate indefinitely as cases continued to spread around campus. While Amherst College began the semester following a similar path to Smith, Mount Holyoke and Hampshire, they've decided to update their protocol with more lax requirements, dependent on student and instructor opinion. Faculty at Amherst are required to distribute anonymous surveys to their classes, asking each student whether or not they would like the class to continue masking. If just one student or even the instructor says that they would like to continue, masks will be required in that classroom. However, if all students and the instructor vote for masks to be optional, then masks will be considered optional. The policy also notes that even in these cases, those choosing to wear a mask must be respected. The implementation of this policy began on October 17th. This comes as a stark departure from Amherst's previous policies on COVID-19 and mask wearing. At the start of last fall semester, travel outside of Hampshire County was heavily restricted for Amherst students. Additionally, testing compliance was strictly monitored, and with student testing rates falling below 90%, the college threatened to impose stricter policies. Now, however, Amherst is one of 2 members of the 5-college consortium not mandating masks for all classes. Students from last year will remember the consortium's attempts to maintain a cohesive set of guidelines for students, such as enrollment in the 5-college testing program. However, the pandemic has evolved, as have attitudes towards it, and each member of the consortium has taken an individualized approach to yet another fall semester of COVID-19.
The Amherst Town Council just signed off on a letter to the UMass Chancellor Search Committee, urging the committee to hire a chancellor that would work with the town after current Chancellor Subaswamy retires, according to Town Council President Lynn Grasmer. The letter requested that the new chancellor work with Amherst on increasing payment to the town, as well as entrepreneurship initiatives and advancing the well-being, racial equity, and climate action in the community, Grasmer said. First, they want to collaborate with the chancellor on increasing payment in lieu of taxes. 38% of the land in Amherst is owned by higher education institutions. This land is considered non-taxable federal land that does not need to pay property tax. This means that Amherst does not receive property tax for 38% of the land in town. Because of this, the burden of taxing falls to the town, Grasmer said. Town Council asked in their letter that UMass pay the town for their land in lieu of or instead of taxes. Grasmer said the university has been working with the town on a number of things, but not with this payment in recent years. Property taxes in Amherst are high, and the high cost of housing is a factor in the town asking the university for payment, Grasmer said. Gerald Jones, owner of Jones Group Realtors, said there is a lack of housing in Amherst, specifically housing for middle-income families. Jones noted that the town of Amherst is anti-development, but further housing development could better meet this demand. There is a demand for and lack of housing in the Northeast and Massachusetts in general, Jones said. But Amherst is kind of on steroids. Geismar said, "We, the town, don't have a lot of land left, so there's no more places to do a lot of big residential building." Geismar noted that the COVID pandemic also drove prices up for Amherst. Since COVID, more rental homes that would have been useful for student housing were converted back into single-family homes, Jones said. This contributes to the student housing shortage off campus. When Jones was asked if the realtors had seen more students taking over residential neighborhoods, he said, "Actually, you know what's funny is we did for many years because we don't have zoning for apartments for student housing. It's all basically, once again, they, the town, try to stop and slow down new construction of any kind. The town is not necessarily trying to work with the university on zoning, but they do want to collaborate with UMass regulating student behavior in these rentals. This includes working on students having wild and loud and late parties," Geismar said. Geismar said the town council is looking at revising the residential rental bylaw with inspections. "What we're also trying to do is protect students from having to live in rat holes," she said, describing that the town council wants to improve the condition of student rentals. Jones believes that the market will change in the future, but the town needs to increase the supply of houses with how much demand there is. Although if the university will pay the town in lieu of taxes, that could help alleviate the burden on the town.
For years, the town of Amherst has experienced challenges with residential street parking throughout Amherst Center. On October 13th, Town Council met to discuss a proposal on a parking restriction on Lincoln Avenue between Amity and McClellan Street, as well as on Sunset Avenue between Elm and Amity Street. The parking restriction for the section on Lincoln Ave would be Monday through Friday between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., while the restriction for the Sunset Ave restriction would be at all times. The restriction is intended to create a safer environment for drivers, pedestrians, cyclists, residents of Lincoln and Sunset Ave, as well as make space for emergency vehicles when needed. Journalism Coordinator Corinne Aurel sat down with District 3 Town Councilor Jennifer Taub and Amherst Transportation Advisory Committee Chairperson Tracy Safian to further discuss the parking restriction proposal.
The issue of on-street parking impeding pedestrian and cyclist and traffic safety in the neighborhood south of UMass, as well as north of UMass, but I represent the neighborhood adjacent to campus to the south, has been an issue for a number of years. I mean, even in the packet for the Town Services and Outreach Committee meeting last week, one of the items was the town manager's March 5th, 2020 memorandum to the prior town council. And in that document, he goes back to 2015 when it might have been the matter first came before the select board. But so over the years, you know, since 2015 and maybe prior to that, a range of parking restrictions have been implemented on several of the streets, you know, in the residential neighborhoods, both to the north and south of campus. So and it's in part for this reason that Lincoln Avenue, the portion between McClellan and Amity, which is where the current round of restrictions are being proposed, as well as Sunset between Elm and Amity, they're almost the two portions of streets in the neighborhood between UMass and Amity Street for which parking restrictions have never been implemented. So it puts, so the full brunt of absorbing the demand for on-street parking on weekdays during the academic year pretty much falls to those two portions of these two streets. And as UMass has grown over the years since 2015, the demand for parking on these two narrow residential streets has increased precipitously. And what we're looking at now in fall of 2023 are the opening of two new dormitories at the corner of Lincoln and Massachusetts Avenue, as well as a new townhouse development that's coming to the corner of Sunset and Fearing. So the demand for on-street parking is about to increase exponentially. So, and the two new dorms at the north end of Lincoln will have will house 824 residents and provide about 100 on-site parking spaces. So for this reason, it's also imperative at this time to, implement some level of parking management and regulations as part of responsibly planning for so many additional residents moving into an already, densely populated neighborhood. So as the demand for parking has increased on Lincoln and Sunset, these are narrow two-way streets, and they each have a lane of parking. So the streets are about 24 to 25 feet wide, and generally, widely accepted standards for a road with 2 lanes of traffic and a parking lane is 27 to 32 feet. So they don't meet the minimum requirements for 2 lanes of traffic and a parking lane. So what we find currently on Lincoln between McClellan and Amity, and again, the street's almost empty during the summer. So the demand for parking is not employees or patrons of downtown businesses. It is related to the parking demand that's not being satisfied at the university when school is in session.
Well, I mean, so right, the focus of why some restrictions are being proposed is the focus is on safety. Is as Jennifer was describing, there's certain times a day when there is a very heavy density of people parking on the street. And as she said, for example, kids can't see, when they're crossing the street, or particularly when cars are parked very close to driveways, there's issues with if an ambulance is called, can the ambulance get in to the property? I'm certified as a driving instructor in Massachusetts. And I mean, one area where you can see a lot of crashes is where the sightlines are poor. So including the driveways and things, those are some of the scenarios that we try to teach drivers to be more aware of and to always watch for. So, I mean, the whole point of having additional restrictions is around safety. And so it'd actually be a safer street.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Amherst Weekly Report. I'm Jade Mosley.
And I'm Mariana Gonzalez. See you next week.